Hello everyone, my name is Seth Thompson, and in this video I will show a variety of Adobe Photoshop techniques used to enhance a colored pencil sketch I created into a more dynamic digital image. Over the next 26 minutes, I will take you step by step through the Photoshop editing process, revealing a variety of techniques that beginner or advanced Photoshop artists will find beneficial. So here's the scanned version of the Alchemist spoon inside Photoshop. And what you can see is I have a squared canvas size, just 1500 by 1500. I like doing this square because then I can easily share it to like Instagram or other places. Just makes for a nice canvas. And then I just have my scanned image sitting on top of a black background right now. I could change that to white just with doing Control-I to invert that. And maybe I'll do that in the end just to make it look a little better. But for now, I want it to be black. And what I'm going to try and do through here, I'm just going to kind of make this up as I go, but the thing I didn't like about the 2D illustration is some of the elements such as the blue brazier here, the flame and everything. This doesn't really, I didn't really get a good sense of lighting within the picture. I want to be able to fade off lighting a little bit in here, so the outer areas are darker away from the brazier. And then also maybe do some defocusing of some of the stuff in the background, which means we're going to need to separate that brazier from the background. And other than that, we'll just kind of make things up as I go. And while I'm here, just really quickly, I think most of you probably know this, but if you don't, whenever you have the magnifying glass active, if you want to zoom in and out of something really easily, just click and hold, and then if you go to the right, it'll zoom in. Whoa! And then if you press Alt to turn it to the magnifying glass to negative, and then go to the left, you can zoom out, or go this way. Right, left, right, left. Super handy whenever you want to just zoom in on a certain portion of the image without getting too close on a specific area. The first thing I'm going to do, since I want to separate the brazier, is to make a duplicate of this by dragging onto the icon right here. So now we have two layers. I'm going to turn off this bottom layer so that as I'm making adjustments here that we'll be able to see things. So for example, if I have my eraser on and I start going like this, we know that I'm actually doing something. So just undo that, and let's go ahead and just work on getting this brazier separated from the background. So first thing I'm going to do is just go to my lasso tool key by pressing L. And up here you can change between these different ones. To start with, let's do the just default one. So come in here, making sure that we have the little flame that was looking out to and covering that up. Pulling this down pretty far so that I can do some nice kind of blending transitional work between those pieces and just pretty much overall kind of around the edges. So now I'm going to do a Control-Shift-I to invert my selection here, and then Control-X to cut that out. And at this point I can just kind of go through with either the eraser tool like this, which I usually like to do to get a broad pass on everything, and start erasing things, or you can actually get in there and get a little bit more refined with some of the different marquee selection tools that are useful to use. So for now, I'm just going to kind of do this by hand and get it fairly close. Okay, a quick break just to show you guys a few tools I'm going to be going over quite a bit. You're going to see me using this, the marquee selections over here, lasso, polygonal, and you can even do magnetic, but the two that we're going to be using the most are lasso, so if you want to really quickly select something like that, and then remove it, and then also the polygonal lasso tool, and that's really good for having nice controlled shapes, and then you can remove it. The other thing that you'll see me doing quite a bit is, for example, with the eraser tool, as I'm erasing things, you'll see the size of the cursor getting larger or smaller, and all you have to do, most of you probably know this, but on your keyboard right beside the P key to the right of that, the two different brackets will go smaller or larger, so you can do either step by step, like pressing it once at a time, or if you hold down on the key, it'll just increase it overall really fast. And the other thing that you'll see me doing too is I'm going to switch between an eraser that has a sharp and then a faded thing. So by default it's set to this kind of fade, where it gives you the nice blend here between the edges, but if you want to get a really nice clean eraser, you need to use this kind of sharp edge. So that being said, let's go ahead and get back to it. So I started erasing everything, and I invert that background color by pressing Control-I with the background layer selected, and then now what I'm going to do is actually change my background color to like a mid-level gray. The reason I'm doing this is just that white is a little bit hard on my eyes. It might be hard on you guys watching as well, so I'm going to turn that down and then my eyes will be happier for that. And then after that, I'm just going through by hand and starting to erase around the edges here. And one thing I need to do is make that solid eraser so that I get a really clean cut right around the edge. I don't want any blurring as I'm doing this to retain that illustrative quality that I did in the two-dimensional drawing. And the other thing I like to do, if you press M on the keyboard, that's a marquee selection for a square selection, and then switching also to between L to do the lasso selection. So using those techniques, what I'll do is I just grab large chunks of color or areas that I want to remove, and I just press Control X to cut those out of there and delete them, and then I'll go through and clean up everything by hand with the eraser tool. And this next part is just me kind of painstakingly going through and erasing everything by hand, since I have all these little intricate chain links that I drew. And the idea in this story with the alchemist spoon, these braziers have this blue kind of mysterious magical flaming light that comes out of them, so that's what I illustrated there. That's why it's blue in the illustration. That's what the Dungeon Master was explaining as we created this. He just mentioned like a blue light. It might not have even been blue flames, but I wanted to put flames in there. And yeah, just a lot of patience on this and time, and you get through it. So the next thing you're going to see me doing again is using that polygonal lasso tool. You remember that I showed you that earlier. When you press L or come over here on the side, polygonal lasso tool, and this will allow us to really nice edges as we start to delete something. And by the way, what you're going to see here, if you ever press Control D when you have a marquee made, it'll deselect. So that's pretty convenient sometimes if you need to just deselect something that you have in there from a marquee selection. So now using that tool, you can see I get nice clean lines, especially for these rays of light that are coming out of the brazier. And that's easily done with this polygonal lasso tool. And again, I'm just removing the big chunks, and then I go through and clean up around the edges a little bit. The one thing I'll have to think about is how I will blend between those areas where the end of the rays meet with the wood over top of the door, because I kind of faded that off with the colored pencils when I was drawing it. So I'll probably just use maybe some type of brush with a fade setting on it or a eraser, and hopefully it'll look good. Might have to play around with it a bit. Okay, so now we have our extracted layer here, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this just in case I make any mistakes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my eraser tool, and I've turned it up to a pretty high faded setting that you see here using this. And I'm going to turn my opacity, I guess, back up to around 100, and I'm going to enlarge the brush size. And just sort of come in here and chew away at this a little bit, these light beams that are coming off here. And this is just so that hopefully things are going to blend a little bit better with those rays that are coming out of the brazier, or brazier. Brazier is something totally different. So just going through here and making sure the pressure sensitivity is working nicely, and then slowly fading away some of this area that's not as important. Or I guess where I should say I want things to blend nicely. Okay. Let's do a little bit more on this one, and I'll decrease the brush size a little bit here, and then increase it again. What I'm trying to avoid is like super hard lines that I cut in. I just want this to be super smooth fade. Alright, to me that looks pretty good now. And now what I'm going to end up doing is trying to darken this background layer, which is our original layer. So I'm going to duplicate this as well. Anytime that I start making major edits to something, I always like to do duplications. And the next thing I'm going to do too is down here, or basically up here, you can do all these different adjustments. Brightness, contrast levels, all these different things are off screen. But if you do them using this, it's destructive, meaning you can't really undo it unless you go through your history. So what I like to do sometimes is go through here. If you click on this button, this allows you to do lots of different modifiers. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and go to levels and change the levels of this background thing so it's a little bit darker. I don't want to go too extreme. And now I'll close that. And the cool thing about this too, you can turn it on or off, and you'll notice that it's only affecting the bottom layer. It's not doing anything to this top duplicate we had. The other thing that's cool too is you can change the strength of those, so you can turn the opacity up or down. So I'm going to keep that up here for just a second about that strength. And the next thing I'm going to do is try and simulate what I think would be a glowing effect around the brazier. So to do that, I'm just going to basically make a black and white mask, and I'm going to first come here to my elliptical marquee tool. I'm going to hide these background layers just to make this a little bit easier for me to visually see. I almost forgot, one thing I'm going to do first is I'm going to hide this gray background, and I'm going to turn our background into black by pressing Ctrl I to invert it. And then I'm going to come back up to this empty layer that we just created, and I'm going to make the marquee selection now using the circle tool. So I'll just kind of basically draw a line where I think maybe it would be nice to have like brightness coming off of this in a somewhat circular fashion based on where this image is. So we could center it. I think something like that feels about right. And now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and fill this with white, but before I do that, if I do it just like it is now, of course it's pure white. So what I want to do is feather this selection. So I'm going to come here and modify, feather. And feather radius by default is usually much lower than this, but I think about 150 might be right. So now what you're seeing is if I fill this, it kind of fades out nicely off towards the edge. Problem is it's still not strong enough, so I'm going to come back up here in the stack. I have my history showing now. You can pull that up from Window and History, and that just allows you to go through all the different steps that you've been doing. And what I'm going to do now is I think I'm going to feather this quite a bit more, so let's increase it about twice the strength to 300. And that's probably going to be about right. Maybe let's do a little bit less. Let's try, like, let's say 240. Okay, that might work. So I'm going to deselect this, and then now we have this layer up here that's just basically this white faded out. I'm going to make a new layer underneath this and fill that with pure black. So if I press X on the keyboard down here, it swaps between colors. So I'm just going to fill this down here. So now we have the solid color underneath, and then I'm going to collapse this. And basically what I'm doing now is I'm making what's going to become a glow mask for us. And I'm going to use this in quite a few different places. You can name it if you want to. I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm going to select all. I'm going to copy this. And first thing I want to do is I'm going to blur out my background a little bit. So we have a couple different duplicates down here. So let's go ahead and add a mask to this layer down here. So if you click this button, this will add a mask, which you can see in here linked up. So under these channels, if you come in here and then you click this to make sure the eyeball is on, now if I paste Control V, I have the actual mask that we made inside here. And what that does, as you can see, is it's actually literally fading the image underneath into what I see under here. If I was to put my color underneath, then obviously, we see the full image of that duplicated layer, or for example, the gray, right? So this is really useful for a number of different things. What we're going to do with this one is we're going to make it a blur. So I'm going to call this blur, because I want it to feel like, oh, maybe around the light, just to show things off a little bit. I want this stuff blurring out. And so now for this entire layer, I'm just going to come up here to filter, pick any type of blur that you want. I'll probably just use a Gaussian blur. Something like this might be a little bit extreme, so I'll turn this down just maybe to around here, and then I'm going to turn on my base layer again. So now you can kind of see there's actually a blur that's going on underneath that's fading off. And who knows, we can call that heat distortion, whatever we want, but I think it just looks kind of cool. So that's what we're going to do here. And you remember we have this thing that changed our levels here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is try and add something that's got a little bit of shadowing all the way through here. And again, using this mask that we made earlier, let's just call this one mask. I'm going to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to go ahead and play with some different settings in here just to get an interesting result. So if you come up here underneath these different selections, there's all this different stuff that happens, and if you do a drag down, you can just see what all the different reactions are. And one thing that's really cool to do is if you come here to the top, now if you press up or down arrow on your keyboard, you can see you just cycle through the different settings. So this is a really quick way to see if anything is occurring that's interesting. Like this is interesting, right? It's really blowing it out, but that's just too much for me. But I do think it's kind of cool, so I'll just remember that color dodge. Overlay is kind of interesting. Vivid light, linear light, pen light. I recommend when you do something like this, you just try a whole bunch of different ones and see what happens. Sometimes you'll find something good and sometimes you won't. So, and then you can come in here and maybe adjust your settings this way. So the problem with this is it's doing like an interesting burn, but now I'm not getting any darkness around my other edges here. So I'm going to keep it like this for a second. I'm going to make another mask copy. Let's view this. And let's turn this into like a multiply so that the white disappears. And we'll turn the opacity up a little bit. So now, you know, we kind of get this faded darkness over here looking effect with the lightness in the middle. So I'm just not sure that's exactly what I want to do, but I'm going to go with it for now. Alright, as I'm doing this, I'm kind of experimenting, so I'm just going to try a few things. Let's switch this from linear burn back to linear light. Now it's really bright around here, and now instead of doing like this to kind of get my darkness around the side, I'm going to try actually reducing this base layer. So if you remember, if we turn this off, we have this blurred layer on top and then the original layer underneath that. So I'm going to take that one and just turn that down a bit so we can simulate our darkness coming around the side. And I think that's cool, but we're starting to lose some of our image. So yeah, let's go back to this original one that was more like the multiply. Let's see what we get here. It starts to feel interesting. And let's just play with the brightness and contrast on this one. And that just kind of simulates it like growing bigger or more affected lighting from the center to the side. So let's undo that, redo. I think that feels about right. And what I think I'm going to actually do is take this mask copy that we're using as a multiply and move it down here underneath of this area. I'm going to duplicate this one more time, our base illustration. Then I'm going to merge this down with Control E. So now what I've done is I've essentially kind of baked in that lighting into this multiply pass. You can see here it's a little bit darker. And now what I think I can do is if I come up here to our linear light layer, the one that's this kind of causing this additional darkness, what we can do now is start to remove some areas. For example, if I was just to press the eraser and come through, you know, it's going to kind of simulate a little bit of this edge brightness around various parts of the spoon and things like that. So I'm going to quickly just undo that. And yeah, so let's do this. Let's turn this up a little bit stronger, this linear light. And in the end, we'll see, I may need to reveal some of the brightness underneath these guys. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to just make an empty mask here by clicking this button. And then now you can see that we have this activated. I don't need to press the I. But what I'm going to actually do is switch to my brush mode by pressing B. And now you can see between the black and white, I'm just going to paint my own mask in here. And the cool thing about this is you can see that I'm painting a mask, and this is almost like using the eraser on top of this, but it's non-destructive, meaning if I don't like the work that I've done, I can just simply disable this mask, and then it's not going to affect my main piece. So I highly recommend, as much as you guys can, work non-destructively. So yeah, I've got the mask layer here selected, and I'm just going to do an overall kind of pass on these with the like a large brush on the edges here to kind of make it simulate like the edge of this is lighting up a bit from that lamp on some of the bigger areas where you might expect edges if this was 3D to catch some light. Like around the bricks and things like that. Definitely around the spoon. I'll do an overall one here. As we get down here, and you could probably even do it on the edges of some of the wood. Places like that. And then we can come in with a higher opacity brush. Like let's make it 100% so that it's going to be completely erasing, or I guess matting out this section. And then we can zoom in and do some additional edge work here. So I'll do that by making this a lot smaller. Then we have more control over where we want the highlights to fall. Around little shapes like this, you know, you could certainly fire up some of the edges to make it feel a lot hotter. Or in here, that kind of thing. Definitely whatever's facing the camera, or sorry, not the camera, but the lamp is what you're going to want to do. In here, you just see me continuing to do the same thing. I've just sped up the recording. Just going through, highlighting the edges of these different bricks, things like that, to get them to pop a little bit better. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit more here, just like around where my signature is, although it looks kind of bad the way I did in ink. And then I'm also going to do like just a little bit of kind of edge highlighting around the piece, just to give it kind of a nice framing, even though it doesn't have to have a lot to do with the actual artistic portions of the image. It's just going to bring some stuff out a bit more. Add as kind of nice framing for the piece. And the other thing that's cool is, since we weren't erasing this earlier, and that we're actually using this as a mask, now we can go through and actually use this for other portions. So for example, I think that this is already looking kind of cool. You know, we got the brightness here, and we got some of the edges firing up. Contrast is a little bit too strong in my opinion here. Oops, turn on a blur again. Sorry, that was turned off for a second. So what I'm going to do is, now I'm here with the channels, I'm going to go ahead and make sure this eyeball's highlighted. Control A to select all, Control C to copy this. I'm going to turn the eyeball back off again. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to paste that in here with Control V. So now you can actually see the mask that we had underneath a minute ago. If I hide everything, this is the mask that's currently sitting within our kind of light thingy that we had here. So I'm going to blur this just a bit. Let's come in here and do maybe a Gaussian blur. Turn this down just a wee bit, something like this. I'm going to make a new mask out of this. So let's Control A, Control C again. First select all and then copy. And now what I want to do is I'm going to go down here. Remember, we had the original layer of our illustration that was just no edits to it. I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to put that above our dark layer here that we had underneath. Still underneath our blur layer. Let's turn our top piece back on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add this as a mask into here. So the thing that we just copied up here, this new one that we blurred, let's make a mask. channels, Control V, paste that in here. Now the mask is live within this piece. So for example, let's just test something out. I'm going to turn up the levels on this piece. See it kind of darkening or getting brighter. I'm going to make it go a little bit brighter. Press OK. And now what I want to do is I think I need to invert this layer, Control I. And then now you can see all these highlights really popping now. And this is obviously way too strong, so I'm just going to turn this down. And now we have a much more faded effect, but it's something that's kind of nice in addition to the a bit of work that we've done up here already. So yeah, that's some of my bag of tricks right there. Just fun little things that can help out, add some more to your piece. And then again, you know, we could try that thing where we flip through the different layers and see if there's something that maybe provides a better highlight around those stones. It feels a little more graphic. I think that's kind of cool, either linear light or normal. And just to wrap this up, I wanted to go ahead and show you a comparison of the two images. On the left we have that original scan that we did from my sketchbook, just straight up. That's the inks and the colored pencils. And then on the right we have the updated image after we played with it in Photoshop. Hello everyone, Seth here. I wanted to personally thank you for watching my video, and if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel because I have a lot of really exciting stuff to come in the future based on my 3D modeling workflows. And also too, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to add them into the section below. And finally, if you would like to see more of my 2D or 3D artwork, please check out my artist page on Facebook, which contains a wide variety of personal and professional pieces I hope you will enjoy. Thanks again, and stay creative.